Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My name is Brother Ibrahim. I was born in Jamaica, the island of Jamaica. And my family is not very big. I have my mother and my father. My mother, she has many brothers and sisters, but as far as my mother and father is concerned, I'm the only one from them. So I'm the only child from my parents. My upbringing was somewhat religious. We did attend church, and there was activities from church like picnics and so forth. My memories concerning Easter would be going to church and doing the regular routine that they have. Christmas time, it would be Christmas tree, presents, lots of presents, visiting others' homes. So in that sense, it was, how can I say, more festive atmosphere. My relationship with the Bible was pretty personal one, very good, because I read the Bible on my own. I also read it in church, and I enjoy my study of the religion of Christianity. What I found was that the Bible helped me to understand the concept of God as best as it could, and it helped me towards my goal, which was Islam. Daily prayers, as far as Christianity was concerned, wasn't important. We did prayers when we went to church, but when we got home, let's say after school, there was no such thing as prayers. You can pray before you went to bed, but we didn't have the concept of daily prayers as Islam does, 5 times a day or more. But in the Christian faith, generally speaking, Sunday was it, and the other days there was no such thing as wajib prayers. You have to do your prayers. There was no such thing in Christianity. Even on Sundays, for example, you can go to church and you can follow, but you didn't have to, pray. What I thought about Islam before converting, I didn't know anything about Islam before converting. When I see people with their costumes, I call it, their headscarf and so forth, I just thought that this is the way they dress in their country, and now they're in this country, and this is how they continue to practice. So I didn't know anything about Islam. I didn't know the difference between the Hindus and the Muslims. To me, this was, a continuation of their way of living in their country. So afterwards, it became quite a revelation to know that, okay, in Islam, the ladies are required to do certain things, and even the men, they're required to have some sort of hijab. My first curiosity about Islam occurred when I was in high school. I remember visiting the library, and out of curiosity I was reading different books on religions. And I remember picking up the Quran, the Holy Quran, and I remember flipping through the pages, and I remember saying something is wrong with it, because I came across the word we did it. So I thought it was plural for many gods, in the way that some other religions they have many gods. So I dismissed Islam at that time, and it was only after one of my good friends passed away that I realized that I should make some conclusions in life before my death. And one of the conclusions that I tried to attempt to make was to discover whether there's a God or not. And if there is a God, will I follow God? Will I obey God? And I also made some other secular plans, like go to university and get married, and so on and so forth. So I believe I accomplished most of these goals. There was no specific chapter at that time that inspired me towards Islam, except that on the day that I said the Shahada, some of the brothers, they invited me out to welcome me into the Islamic Brotherhood. And I remember the brothers were telling me that you now have to choose an Islamic name. And they were giving me different names like so and so, but I did not know the history of these people, and I did not know what they did, and I don't know their background, because I was brand new into Islam. I knew almost nothing. So I recall the story of Prophet Ibrahim, how he looked at the moon and it set, and he said, no, this cannot be my God. How he looked at the sun and it set, how he looked at the stars, and he concluded that my God has to be higher and better than these things. And this was probably the verses that inspired me to choose the name of Ibrahim. What did I think about hijab before I said the Shahada? I did not know anything about hijab, actually. To me, it looks nice, but what are the technicalities of hijab? At that time, I knew nothing. I was blank. The media didn't influence my vision of Islam at the time of saying the Shahada, because I knew nothing about Islam almost. I knew the word Islam, I knew the word Muslims, but what the Muslims and Islam portray and what they do, I was blank. The day of my conversion was a special day. It was a Friday. And I remember taking a shower, and I remember after my shower, I got dressed, clean clothes, and I remember walking to the center. I wouldn't call it a mosque, because that place is not a mosque. It's a center where many people gather on Fridays so that they can perform their prayer. And I got there to meet a brother, because he had mentioned that this is where he does his prayers on Fridays. So I went there and I met him outside, and we went in, and I sat with him, and we performed the Salatul Jummah, the Friday prayer, together with maybe 50 other brothers and sisters. I don't know about the sisters, but about 50 other brothers. And after the prayer was done, he introduced me to the sheikh, and he mentioned to the sheikh that I would like to become Muslim. So with all the witnesses that were there, or should I say some of them, because some had left, they had taxis to do and whatever else they had to do. So there was many brothers who witnessed my conversion to Islam. And I said the Shahada, and this is my first afternoon after that. I told my immediate family at first. My wife, I told her. I told my mother, and later on I told my children. So this was the immediate announcement. Later on, friends and acquaintances, they got to know from chit-chat and so on, but immediately I did mention it to my close ones. The reaction of my family wasn't drastic. The reaction of my mother was one of acceptance. She mentioned that, you can choose any religion you want, as long as people are not harming other people, there's no danger in this. And the reaction of my friends and so on was a bit more apprehensive, because I believe they were more affected by what the media was saying about Islam and what they perceive Islam to be, and Islam being new to them, it seemed as if it was a threat. But to me, it was the logical conclusion to my questions. The thing that I found contradictory between Islam and Christianity was that Christianity focused on Jesus being the Son of God, and Islam refutes Jesus being the Son of God. Islam says basically that Jesus was a prophet, he was a man, he walked the earth and he ate food just like everyone else, which makes a lot more sense than the deification of Prophet Isa. And to me, that answered a lot of questions I had when I was Christian. For example, when I was Christian, I couldn't understand who was in charge when God was dead. They say that Jesus, he died on the cross, and after that he was in the valley of death for 3 days, so to speak. So my question is, how can the Almighty God die? Okay, how can death overcome someone who's almighty? And when I understand the Islamic point of view concerning Prophet Isa, it makes more sense that there is one who is almighty, and everything else is just a creation of God. My first year as a Muslim was quite calm. I was studying at the university, and I was attending the Friday prayers on a regular basis, and I was also going for Thursday night's program on a regular basis. So there was no hustle and bustle or major gaps between me keeping contacts with the people that I just met. So it was a good sound first year. I got to learn a lot about Islam. I got to visit various centers to see how they worship, to see if there's differences between one group and another group. And this was the time when I began to learn about the difference between Shia, Sunni, and what happened in the history a long time ago. Because when I was reading the Quran, it was only Islam. There was no discussion in the Quran about, well, from my point of view anyway, there was no discussion about Shia, Sunni, and divisions. So in my first year, I grew quite a bit. My most difficult challenge had to do with my prayers, because after I began to work, it was difficult to perform my prayer and also stay at work at the same time. So I had to make choices. Do I do my prayer late? Because many times I'm at work and the time for prayer would come. And in the wintertime, it would be an interesting situation where the sun would set and I would still be at work. So then, because I didn't really understand the importance of prayer, and I didn't understand I didn't have good priorities at that time, I often did my prayers afterwards. So this was my major problem. After a few months, I realized that some of the things that we do in Islam has to do with culture. So there is cultural undertones among certain groups, and I tried to understand what the culture part was and what was the real Islam. In this way, me being, let's say, new